Today's guest on the Keen on Yoga podcast is Taylor Hunt for the second time. So our second episode brings us together on being a teacher. It's a specific discussion on what being a teacher means and how best to show up for your students. In this conversation, we talk about the various challenges of being in the role of a teacher, how to make sure you don't believe your own hype whilst having the confidence to teach from what you know, and equally, where we get our inner resources from and the constant necessity to keep checking back on ourselves. 4. It's all too easy to go up a blind alley as a yoga teacher without a student or a peer review and feedback. So our conversation is important today, and Taylor brings a wealth of experience to our chat, having been involved with addiction until Ashtanga changed his whole life, his whole trajectory. So if you haven't already, please check out his website generally, his book, and Trini Foundation, which is his project for the recovery of those suffering with addiction. Treating them with yoga, of course. Also, don't forget to leave us a feedback, review, or if any of this has touched you at all, please leave a donation. So, without further ado, welcome Taylor back to the Keen on Yoga podcast. It's great to have you. So welcome, Taylor Hunt. Really happy to have you. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. I know. It's been a while. It's been about a year, hasn't it? We had a podcast. But this is a bit different because we're going to talk on a single... The idea of these ones is that we talk on a single issue. So it's not a hagiography of someone's background, although we could talk a lot more about your background. It's very deep and intriguing. Today, we're going to talk to Taylor about... And you talk a lot on your... I was looking at your social media for a particular... Because I wanted to talk to you just because you have a lot to say. And, and some of it's controversial. And I kind of like that, being a kind of controversial figure. And a lot of it's on teaching and teachers and relationship to teaching, and relationship to students. That's how it comes through to me, So I thought, right, let's have a little chat today on role of a teacher, right? So first of all, what qualifies us in the first place to be a teacher? I put a post out recently on imposter syndrome, and I've certainly found that standing up in front of a class, and I'm no paradigm of sorted outness, let's say, and certainly in my younger years, I felt more of a wreck than the people I was teaching, So what qualifies us, would you say, to be there in the role of a teacher, and then what are we teaching?
Man, it's a loaded question. I mean, it's from a bunch of different perspectives. The role of a teacher for me, or what I look for as a teacher, is that they're a human being and that they're having a human experience and they're real with it. They don't try and pretend to be something that they're not. And they show up as guides, similar to how my sponsor would show up for me. And so, but the role of the teacher is really to bring us closer to truth, to establish healthy relationship, to be, or to be honest and open, and create a foundation for growth for both people in sort of this back and forth kind of way. And so the role of the teacher is, I think, very unique in the sense that, no one is held that you have to be, especially not in my case, but a disciple, or you have to be a student or any of this kind of stuff. It's it's from this willingness of that this person has been through a difficult experience, or this person is further along in the race than I am, and the acknowledgement of that, and then saying I have something to learn or gain from this person. And that's when the relationship is, back and forth. It's back and forth, because the teacher is creating this format, or this sort of, you're kind of coddling a relationship, building a relationship.
If people are looking for a teacher, And you don't know. The thing is, you don't know until it's too late often. What are the kind of, is there any kind of idea of qualities you might look for in a teacher? I mean, you mentioned someone who's not going to control you, or, kind of like make sure that, because I mean, obviously these days, especially with Ashtanga, I know you've had politics where you live as well. There's a sense of, well, these are my students and I don't want them to go to someone else. And, so let's try and keep them with me, right? There are unfortunately many teachers that will also abuse their power. Right, which is
totally.
Such a shame. So how do we find or what are we looking for to know, a potentially open and honest and genuinely compassionate teacher to a teacher who maybe is part, because we're all things, it's not to say that it's a bad teacher and a good one, but certain people may not gel, may not be right for you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, not everyone is going to be a student of mine or that kind of stuff. But I think it starts with dialogue. There has to be some sort of boundaries established between teacher and student, of course, but there has to be some sort of dialogue between the two. And one of the big red flags is when the teacher puts themselves up on a pedestal. That's a big red flag. When they're talking about that somehow, they're in a position of power and they're using it for a position of power instead of like the greater good. And so I think it's really important, to check your gut, to walk in there, to see if this is a person that you jive with. And I think that people need to kind of test it out. It's not going to happen the first day. It didn't happen like that with me for Sharat. I sort of fell in after, I spent a week with him in New York, and I kind of fell in after that week. And I was like, I'm into this person. And the reason why is because he has a family. He was speaking honestly. He was actually struggling in the conference that he gave. It was a very emotional conference that he gave after leg class. And I was like, this is a real human being. And nowadays, when I'm looking or when students are going into, places, they need to ask themselves those deeper questions. There was a time where my studio had a teacher that was extremely controlling and gaslighting and all of this stuff. And that person is no longer here because it didn't feel right to me. It didn't feel right to the students. It didn't feel right. They didn't jive with the community. All that kind of stuff.
What would it look? What would it look like? We say a teacher's controlling now. I mean, how does that transpire in actuality? Now, I think that it's a very fine line, because I know that you're a traditional student of Sharatji, and you're quite particular in how you stop and start people, right? And how does that differ with you stop there to I'm controlling you, you stop there? Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's a subtle boundary, right? I'm just thinking of one element of control.
But but that's happening together as a team, and it's the understanding of philosophy. When we say hey, you should stop here, it's not a judgment of character or any of this stuff. It's really we're doing this as a team. There's a method to this madness that we're kind of doing with this yoga. And if you listen to me, I've had a bunch of people had success with it. If you don't listen to me, it's okay. But you're probably not going to get the same sort of outcomes as what you had before, but that's much different than a teacher being gossipy, a teacher talking behind other people's backs. I've experienced this. I mean, Ashtanga teachers do this. Because that's an element of control too. When you're talking bad behind someone, whether it's in someone's DMs or on a podcast or any of that stuff, that's manipulation and gaslighting and all of this stuff. And that is gross ass behavior.
I like it. Gross ass. No, I was thinking of two. I didn't really, right, okay, that's a shame. I was thinking twofold, right? There's one that's kind of censorious, kind of I kind of see it as a slight stricture around, because, the posture candy thing can be an element of controlling people. No, you can't do this, right? And the second is the cliques. I've seen it a lot of teacher will build an inner circle around them, right? Of certain adept students who will then be the assistants, and then, and you feel lesser. You feel you need to somehow earn their place or prove yourself to be in that circle, and then you feel what do I do? And you see this dynamic a lot. So I was thinking of those two capacities, right?
Yeah, but I think there's more than that, really. I think there is more than that. Like the teacher can be the source of pain too, or an assistant. They're gossipy, or they shun someone out of a community, or they don't feel like they fit in because like these people, are cliquey towards this other person. And none of that should happen. Like, one of the most important things at Ashtanga Yoga Columbus is that what we're trying to do is make sure that there's a healthy environment for anyone, whether they're in addiction or a normal person, can come in and feel safe and work through their issues. And if the teacher is gaslighting people, or the teacher feels like they're manipulating, or any of these different things, it's an unhealthy environment, and the students won't stick around. So like the role of me, like I've acknowledged this in my own space, and you have to say no more, and you have to like part ways with those people, because what you're trying to do is create a healthy environment. And nowadays it's a healthy, like in my studio, it's a healthy environment, and I feel good about it. But there's times where I felt like it wasn't. There's times where I felt like it was. And that's just me being 100% honest. It's like I travel a lot. And so like I'm trying to do a specific thing with my studio, make it safe for the addict to walk in. And if that person, if the person who's not holding the space, isn't doing it the way that I feel like it should, or there's gossip or that kind of stuff, it feels gross. You can't do it. It's like Ashtanga already has like this bad reputation. And we're not trying to make it any worse. It's a privilege to be able to teach these people.
Yeah, you're speaking truth there.
It's like, what the hell?
Yeah, what the hell's wrong with you? Yeah, but what about the idea that we're teaching nothing but asana? I mean, there's a strong movement these days to be clear. We're not qualified to teach, whether it be, we're not doctors, we're not chiropractors, we're not social workers, we're not therapists, right? But I mean, then it's just like, well, are we gymnastic teachers? I mean, I think there's a tricky one. You mentioned making a safe place for addicts and people to walk in. I mean, people come with issues, and so how do we deal with the facts to not over claim, right? To not get kind of overly hubristic, but to also be clear that it's not just simply gymnastics.
Yeah, I think that it starts with making sure that I'm always using I statements, and I'm speaking from my experience. I give a conference every week, and it's always I statements. And if I do say you, I usually correct myself back to I statements, because that means I'm speaking from my own experience, not because like I'm trying to pat myself on the back or puff my chest up. It's like I'm speaking from my own experience. I've had a lot of experience with the practice. I feel like it broke me. I feel like it put me back together. I feel like it broke me again, brought me back together psychologically, mentally, physically, whatever, all of those levels. It put me back together. But we are teaching asana, but we're also teaching, teaching the fundamentals of breath with movement and meditation, which is like fundamentally one of the most powerful things that you can do, and feel your feelings. We're teaching that. So we teach asana, but we also teach like these deeper, subtle things. And then there's also like a personal growth thing that is happening, like watching ourselves get better at something in our life. And in our yoga practice, we're watching these centimeters, of growth. And it's awesome. There's personal growth with that. And that's another category that I think some people can lean into. And then the last one is like that it's spiritual, that it's a spiritual practice. And like, if you haven't felt that, or the intention hasn't been there, then try and figure that out, because that has been one of the most rewarding things, Adam, that I've ever felt in my life, is to feel like my asana is actually prayers and this deep devotional.
That's just not a popular kind of vibe to bring in generally these days. I think people are, very reticent to put their faith in something, I'm in total agreement with you there. I suppose that would lead to my next question, is like how, one, people are obviously coming up, stuff is coming up for people. What do you do with that, right? I mean, do you point them in different directions, or do you, how much do you give advice? And secondly, how do you insert a context around the asana practice to students personally? How much do you get involved in, well, maybe look at the Gita, or maybe look at blah, blah book, or did you, where do those boundaries meet?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm speaking from my personal experience, and really what I'm trying to do when I teach from people or teach to people, I'm literally trying to get it so that their mind is open and their heart is open. And when the students ask where they should go to physical therapy, I'm never like, hey, let me help you figure that out. I'm like, here's a person you can talk to. In order to do that. So I feel like my role a lot of times is to be a resource for people, to connect this network of people. And then it feels authentic and good to me, like it feels like it's in alignment. And, it's like I can suggest stretches, or I can suggest, maybe doing some therapy on like something that I've had go wrong. But I mean, really, we got to leave it to the experts. And there's plenty of, I think the real problem today, and this is like a controversial idea, but I'll say it, is that I think that the newer teachers nowadays, they don't have a lot to share because there's not life experience behind it. And the value of someone like an Adam Keene, a Keno McGregor, a LaRuga, a Taylor Hunt, a Tim Feldman, is that we all have sort of shared life experiences, and then we all have our unique life experiences as well. And there's a lot of depth and value, and that's where it is right now. And as the kids, the younger people come up and teach,
I still feel like a young kid, really.
All that stuff. Yeah. I feel like a grown ass man.
Do you? Well, that's good. Oh, that's good. It's good for you. I mean, I think a lot of it's to do with confidence. I mean, it was all there before, but I think that the Mysore situation, and when you're in Mysore, in my personal experience, and maybe you have a completely different experience of this, Taylor, and that's great, but I felt that there was a peer pressure to toe the line, and I felt some of the things I might say were untoward and it wouldn't be received well by my social peers, my group, right? And so having a little distance from that, helped me speak out a bit more, although it's not contradictory to my love of Mysore and tradition. It's just, I think there's a lot of, it's easy to get polemical when you're involved in this situation.
Totally. I think so too. There is a lot of politics in Ashtanga yoga, but there's also a lot of politics.
Yes, of course. Yeah. And there's a lot of,
it's
to be fair, there's a lot of community as well. So, it's a double-edged sword, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I tend to look at it like it's a lot, because Ashtanga people and teachers, I don't think that people understand, but like, and maybe this is jaded look, and maybe this is controversial too, but, like we're a bunch of lone wolves, and it's like, I'm not going to let someone else tell me what to do. Like, I'm going to, this is why people like kind of get in this weird, like, hey, they're my student. You're not allowed to teach them, or you're not allowed to go to this workshop.
And you've had that experience of that, have you?
It's so, oh yeah. Yeah. There's, of course I've had that experience. Like, and that's rooted in insecurity, like my students, they can go learn from someone else, like they can, I'm having Tim Feldman come to my studio so that my students can understand like a different perspective and have value in it and find the value in it. And so like, and I'm not insecure about it because Tim's not Taylor and Taylor's not Adam. And Adam's not LaRuga, and Adam's not David.
I think the laws of market capitalism, at least, surely that if you've got a good product, as it were, then you shouldn't be afraid to hem in the market, right? So you should, and people will appreciate you.
I feel this way a lot.
I mean, what about the authorization thing then? Where do you see that fitting in? I mean.
I mean, and now you're really going to try.
Yeah, of course I am. That's what I've been trying to do all along.
Yeah. Yeah. Authorization, I think, is important. And I think it's important because it shows the depth of study. And for anyone who has been able to commit themselves to going over to India for 3, 6, 12, 9, however, 19, 24 months in order to get authorization, it means that they have a passion and desire to be a teacher. That does not mean that they are a good teacher.
That there's not good teachers that haven't been as well, right? Because we can't say that some people who, have kind of mums, who've got kids, etc., weren't able to do that, and also want to teach Ashtanga. It would be unfair to say that they aren't adequate teachers, just because they couldn't go to Mysore. You know what I mean? Maybe they've learned from a teacher who's a very good teacher and who has been to the source. I think it's something to be said about going to someone who's been in that kind of that direct transmission of it. And I think there is something to be said about that. But not everyone can make it over.
Yeah, I mean, I am not taking away. I mean, authorization has no bearing on the people that have the desire to be teachers and do it in an authentically them way, but who are unable or unwilling to go to Mysore, India. That it takes nothing away from them. And I think that the conversation usually goes like, I can't do that, and so I'm not worthy. And I'm not here saying like you're not worthy because you're not authorized. I'm saying that the value of an authorized teacher is really high, in my opinion. But that doesn't take anything away from the other people that are doing it day in and day out that are not authorized, who, like my all of my assistants, they're not authorized, and they're some of the greatest teachers. There's a couple that I'm like, they're better teachers than I am, that are assistants of mine, and they are not authorized at all. And so that takes nothing away from this other category of people. You can still teach it authentically. You can teach it traditionally. You can teach it with your integrity intact. It's not for everyone. And the authorization just gives this baseline. And the baseline is that they're dedicated practitioners. They were able to drop their life and go over there. But there's dedicated practitioners that are in my community that are probably better teachers than some of the authorized teachers. Because you have the desire and the financial capital to go over there, that does not mean that you're an amazing teacher. And a teacher shows up different than just like having the desire to teach. The teacher has the desire to teach, has the skill set in order to teach, has the life experience to teach, has something to share with other people. And that could be a category, that could be a mom, like who has never been to Mysore, who just practices every damn day, and that's nothing to take away from them. It's two different categories of teacher, It's two different categories of practitioners.
Or kind of dovetails back into the original question of what's the quality of a good teacher, right? So the qualities are probably consistency, in terms of their own practice, right? Life experience, a wish to help, right? Rather than just simply, show, demonstrate their own ability, right? That kind of sincere interest in another human being always helps, right? And then an openness to continue learning, So these are qualities that are nothing to do with authorization, right? I suppose you mentioned a tradition, right? And teaching traditional Ashtanga yoga is high up on your priority list, I think, right? What does that mean for you? Bearing in mind that, as we know, that this tradition is still relatively young, right?
Yeah. So tradition to me, and I recently did a little video on this, and I posted it to Instagram because someone asked about it. Tradition to me means that you can teach. You teach to the individual. And I think the real problem back in the day is that there was no assistance in the room that was helping Sharat or Patabi Joyce or Saraswati. There was no assistance. And so they were doing it alone. And what happened somewhere around, I think like mid 90s to like, maybe 2005 or 6 or something like that, what we started realizing or giving to people was more dogma, and that everyone's experience is supposed to be the same. And when I went to Mysore in 2010 or 2011, it was like the first time that I'd been there, and Saraswati and Sharath were teaching together because Patabi Joyce had just passed away not too long ago. And so they were trying to figure it out. And there was no assistance. And so no one ever had a bird's eye view of like how Sharath was teaching. They would just take their own experience. And so what I realized is that my second time going back, they were outside, they were doing different programs. Sharath was by himself and Saraswati was by herself. And what I started realizing is that they start incorporating assistance. And on my third trip, I went over there for 3.5 months. My third trip, I actually got to assist. And it was like one of the first batches that ever got to assist in Mysore. And that, I think it's really powerful because we started understanding that everyone who was assisting, there was maybe 7 or 8 of us at the time, everyone understood the value is because of how it was being delivered differently to every person. Some people got a pass on Kapotasana. Some people got a different emphasis on this posture. Some people got third series fast. Other people got it slow. Other people, like he was hounding them to get this one detail over and over and over and almost ignoring them until they do it, And so we started seeing that wasn't everyone's experience. It was just this one person. And that took the blinders off. And it said, okay, well, tradition for us is not that everyone has to be taught the same. It's that we're learning the same thing in the best way that we can teach that person, or that person can be taught. We're teaching them in the best way that they can be taught. And that exploded my mind. One of the biggest learning curves I ever had was being in that room. And I've got to assist several times now and watching and learning because we're not all doing it the same. We're doing the same things. There's the same components, but we're not all doing the same thing. Some people are getting taught how to devote their lives to it. Other times people are getting, information of how to open their hips more. Other people are getting the acceptance and surrender. And other people are being focused on the details of the practice. Other people are being taught that they're not breathing right, and how do they breathe right? Other people are being taught what it's like to not be the star of the show.
Yeah. No.
They're being humbled, so there's and so that really changed everything.
You explained that really well.
And I think I made this video. Yeah, made this video and the video was really like me addressing this because that's when our community, the Ashtanga community, shifted as a whole into dogma teaching, into this traditional sense, and the traditional
unfortunate marriage of East meets West, really. So I think we saw it through our own spectacles what tradition means, right? And it's never meant literal and rational, kind of pursuit of specific details over in India, right? I mean, look at the Sanatana Dharma, the Hindu tradition, right? Like it's always been a plethora of different perspectives, grouped, in a very broad sense, right? You can't pin it down. And then, that goes the same with the asana teaching, right? And as you rightly said, I mean, it's never been, and I don't think there was ever a pause when it wasn't taught individually. It was just that for some reason, we are very blinkered and polarized in the West, and we kind of want to find actualities and objective facts and then kind of apply them, just kind of objectively. So we kind of fit things into these neat boxes, which is, as you are, know, going to India is to see those boxes aren't that neat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like we try to put our Western mind on top of a very Eastern mindset kind of system of yoga. And we say like, we want to abide by the rules. And the rules are that you're learning the sequence, but you're being taught the best way that you can, instead of the rules like, I have to look like this other person. I have to have the same experience as this other person. We're all supposed to have the same body shape, all of that kind of stuff. It's just, that's a bunch of bullshit that the Western people made up.
Yeah. I mean, and also for the purposes of controlling an audience back home, right? I've got I'm the one that went there. I've got everything. I've got everything from the source, and it's exactly this way, and you have to come, because I'm the only one that can tell you how to do it exactly like this. It's a bit of a shame.
Yep, and that's manipulation. That's gross.
It's gross. What about being put on a pedestal? I mean, you must have been put on a pedestal. It's a difficult place for a teacher. Some teachers are happy to be up there, but what do you do when you see the students put you on a pedestal?
I make a conscious effort to continue to step down.
It's an obvious answer, isn't it? Really, but it's.
That's what I do.
It's a difficult place though, because the tendency is there. We could, we either kind of. I think I did a post that was like you're either. You're like a fucker, or.
Well, I mean, I think that the most powerful and helpful thing for me, and I don't think that a lot of people understand this, is that I have a program of recovery that continues to keep me right-sized, and it is very easy to see how someone who was in my position. Or, around the world, they have a big program, they have people listening to them. And all of a sudden, like, it gets into abuse of power, a super ego, all of that stuff, instead of it actually being about yoga. And I feel like the best thing that I got going on is I have a wife who's in recovery. I have, and she works a program. I have a sponsor. I have a sponsorship family. I have people that are literally telling me when I'm off track.
Yeah.
You're off track.
And we don't have a peer. That's great. You have that peer review.
That joke wasn't funny because it was mean. Yeah, I have peer review, and like people don't understand that. They think that somehow, I consciously am stepping off of that because I just don't want people to tell me that you're doing good as I like fall off the cliff. Like I would rather have people around me that can be like have an open conversation with me. It's like. I didn't like what you just did there. I didn't like the joke that you made. And the reason why is because, that was an asshole thing to say, or that was a mean thing to say, it's like, and I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm not going to make a joke like that anymore. Like, thanks for letting me think about that. And, or I talked to my sponsor and he's like, yeah, your motives were off. I'm like, shit, you're right. Okay. Let me make this correction. Let me right size myself. Let me say something positive in my social media. Let me say something positive in my community instead of like, creating a joke or inside joke or being mean to students or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. It's just that I'm continually trying to be right sized. And that's me having a human experience. And that's me like having a conscious effort of being like, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to sit on that mirrored throne. I don't want to sit up on a stage. That ain't me. The value in me is I'm actually one of them. And I've been through a really tough time in my life and I'm willing to share and talk about it and be vulnerable. And that's the power. It's not that I'm up on some sort of throne making like these amazing decisions. It's like, no, I'm actually human. I make so many mistakes. I voice my opinion when I shouldn't, I make jokes and it makes people uncomfortable, because there's a truth behind it, like all of these things. And it's fine. That's who I am. I want to laugh sometimes. I want to be serious. Like sometimes I want to be vulnerable and cry. And sometimes I want to practice my ass off. And other times I want to like be sitting on the couch and not doing anything, but like, I'm trying to be a real person. And I'm never trying to be up on a stage. And I think the real problem is when someone puts themselves up on the stage, consciously stays up there, abusing power between the students. Like it's not okay. It can't happen in the Ashtanga community anymore. Like it needs
Yeah.
So,
I mean, how do you draw the line though between just being a kind of mate, being friends with the student, and some kind of boundary, or there has to be some kind of hierarchy, right? Then as much as you're the teacher, and sometimes perhaps you might have to say uncomfortable things to people. Otherwise, you're just a glorified cheerleader, aren't you? A yes man, right? Like just doing great, and nothing ever changes, right? So it is a fine line again, perhaps.
Yeah. It is a fine line, and I'm always trying to like negotiate and figure out where the line is. And there's what I realize is that today my circle is small of people that I talk to, the people that I consider friends. Not many of them are actually students. It's a very small thing. And then there's another ring of people that, like I would consider like acquaintances. And then there's other ones who I consider students. And then there's other ones that, and so I do draw some lines. I'm not hanging out with all of my students, but I am consciously making an effort to be like, this is not about Taylor. Taylor's done his work, and the work continues for him as he shows up every day. But this is about you doing the work and me trying to get the focus, instead of it being on me, to about this community of people that are inspired by the practice, that can show up and be different in the world. Like, it's about them. The real problem in teaching is that it becomes about the teacher. My community is not about Taylor. Like, I have a huge voice. People listen, they hear me, all of that kind of stuff, but it's about them.
Yeah.
It's the teaching is about them. And without the students, we're not even teachers.
That's part of it. Let's be honest, that, for many people, especially those in recovery, they'll see you and they'll, and it's great. They'll be super inspired by what you've done, right? As an example, and also as something to have faith in that can happen for them as well, right? So, that's not a small thing, right? I mean, on that note, how do you motivate? You see people, I mean, how far do you go? You see someone dropping off, maybe they're coming a lot, and suddenly they're not really coming much anymore, I mean, do you phone them up, or, I mean, how do you motivate them, or do you just leave them alone and let them come to it? What's your experience with that and helping, people stick on program with that,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so I make it pretty clear in the talks that I give. I devote time and energy into my students. Like, I work with them, I meet with them from time to time. I give conferences and answer questions and all of that stuff. And I make it pretty clear, like, when I'm talking, that the reason, if I do reach out to you, it's that your presence is missed, and sometimes you have to remind the students. Sometimes you have to tell them that there is someone who actually cares about you, who is thinking about you, who wants to continue to help you, and knows that yoga can be a positive influence in your life. And I have reached out to people, and it's because I care. It's not to, guilt them into not practicing, or that because they're not practicing, has nothing to do with that. It's like, you're not here anymore. And I need you to remember that you're an important part of this community, and you're allowed to come in here and be seen, and you're also allowed to come in here and have some space and tell me what I can do to support you and coming back in here.
Oh, yeah.
And some people are like, let's do it. Other people are like, I'm not going to do it at all.
Really?
I'm not coming back, and you have to be able to let go of them.
What about dealing with tough students? Do you have any experience or advice for teachers that, struggle with relationships with difficult students? I mean, they keep coming to the class, but they're reticent to take any information on, or, and they're doing it, so-and-so teachers taught them this way. They don't really want to try it your way. I mean, do you have any anecdotes or any wisdom to share on that for teachers particularly?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that has helped me is to understand that it is principles before personalities. And what that means to me is that I don't have to like this person. We don't have to be best friends. But I do need to share principles of integrity and open communication. And regardless of how tough they are, I need to continue to be open. It's my job to keep the door open for them, even though that they are very difficult to deal with. And I do that pretty frequently. And there's times where someone would be like, hey, you know what? I learned this from Kino on YouTube. And I'm like, okay, well, that has a great, huge amount of value, but the feedback that I'm personally giving you right now is maybe different than what the video is actually sharing. And so like right now, like I'm the person who's standing in front of you, and it's like let me teach you. And I think that we're constantly as teachers trying to make sure that we're kind of asking, do you want my feedback or do you not want my feedback? Do you want to be a student or do you just want to be present in the room? And that is perfectly okay to sort of, to consciously, there's a bunch of people in my actual studio that they're there every day, and I can tell that they're not my students. And that's perfectly okay because I'm not insecure about my teaching. And if the time arrives that I can be their teacher or that I can show them something and I can build that trust, then I'll do it. Like the door's never closed to them. It's only open.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something I've learned over the years that you're one, as you say, not everyone has to be a friend. It's not about, people necessarily liking you as a person. It's about having your own integrity. And secondly, that you can hold space without, and teaching isn't about literally people following your advice, right? Teaching is a lot broader than that, and it's about allowing people space for their own experience and trying to contextualize that in a safe and affirmative environment, right? Good.
Correct.
Glad we're on the same program there.
Yeah, we're on the same deal there.
All right. Okay. So, what about the philosophy and the God bit? And then finally, I mean, I know the 12-step program, one of it is to find some spiritual affiliation there, right? I mean, it's an incredible program if anyone's done any research on it. And I know you bring that into the way you look at the teaching. I mean, do you kind of contextualize what people are doing in the studio and try and kind of insert that element, or do you just completely non-sectarianly dish out the asana and let them work it out themselves? I mean, how do you contextualize what you're doing to make it something other than just mat gymnastics, bad mat gymnastics?
I mean, honestly, I speak from my own experience when I'm talking about my higher power, and they have to choose whether or not they want to make their yoga practice about that. And it's none of my business to tell them what they should or shouldn't believe. And everyone basically has a God of their own understanding, whether it be nature or, like a giant red teddy bear, or it's like whatever it is, it can be whatever you want it to be. It can be Christian.
Do you mention this stuff in the asana teaching?
I mean, I think that the real time that I'm able to address like these sort of things is when I do conference, which I do it once a week, and we spend about half hour, 45 minutes, and I'm spending, I've spent ample time talking about my higher power and how it continues to unfold in my life, and so I'm not afraid of sharing it, but I'm always speaking from my own experience, and I'm never telling them they should believe what I should believe. I'm inviting them that there could be this other avenue, and that other avenue has to be trekked by them, not by me.
What I mean, just on a personal level, what does that higher power mean or look like for you?
No one's ever asked me that. So I believe in the universal truths of all of the religions. I believe in the basis of like all of the religions, like has fundamentally sound philosophies in like loving one another, taking care of ourselves, giving time, giving service to other human beings, showing up in a place of gratitude and living in a place of faith, whether it is a good or if your life is in a good place or a bad place. I also believe in surrendering. I get on my knees every morning before I practice, and really when I wake up, and also when I go to bed. And I ask and I say thanks for like giving me another day of sobriety. And then I also ask that I align my will with whatever their will is, because my will gets me to drinking and drugging. And their will has gotten me the last 16 years of sobriety that I have. And so I'm making this conscious effort to say, like, allow me to get out of the way so that you can continue to do the work, because my life was shit before, and now it's amazing. It's amazing. And the reason why it's amazing is because I've done the work, but I continue to live in this place of faith and acceptance and gratefulness, and that I'm aligning my will with my higher power. And I'm always trying to figure out how to do that. And I'm always trying to figure out how to be in faith and not to live in fear, because I do not believe that you can live in faith and fear at the same time. You have to choose one. And so my higher power is something that I do. I can try to connect with on a daily basis. And, I find my higher power in my asana practice, this deep silence. I also find my higher power in 12-step meetings. I find my higher power speaking to me through other people. And I find my higher power brings into my life the things that I need at the time that I need them. I just have to have open eyes. And the yoga practice continues to open my eyes so that I can see how these people and what is being said, how it can best serve me living my dharma, living my path.
Okay, it's a nice place to stop. Thank you, Taylor, for wonderful conversation. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.